Hi, everybody. It's Steve Olson with WSO. We have a special guest today, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Author and researcher, Dr. Miller reveals a depth of knowledge and experience in alternative agriculture, physics, and metaphysics. Miller began working in the secret world of Navy intel. This is like the SEALs and then MRU. And in the late 60s, that's what he was doing. Now he has this amazing experiences and conclusions to share. He's a prolific author. He's on many of the leading edge concepts in science and metaphysics, and we're very, very happy to have you, Doctor.
Thank you.
So today we invited you to come in and start out the conversation. Obviously, my channel is all about looking at and observing the phenomenon of Nibiru, Hercules, Marduk, however you want to put it. This huge, what we think is a solar system or brown star, dwarf star coming into our system. We observe it, Dr. Miller. We have people from all over the world that subscribe and to learn more about this. And then secondly, we're already starting to start small local groups. And so there's kind of two things that I wanted to talk to Richard about. One, what is the kind of current state-of-the-art thinking about where this thing is and what they're doing to mitigate it? And then number two, maybe get into a little bit of some of the survival stuff and things that we could think about that way down the road.
Sure, I'd be happy to address any of this that I can, with a preface that I know that I don't really know what's happening. I can only connect dots and have a general sense of, gee, I think this is kind of important to pay attention to, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And okay, so regarding Nibiru, yes. Of course, Joe Clark was interviewed by Kerry Cassidy last night, or was it today, on Planet 7X Mercury Rising. And I have found Gerald Clark's works semi-useful in my own integration of what I think is going on, biblical prophecy. I got to meet a guy named Bob Dunn and several others on Kerry Cassidy, and while he may or not seem extreme, I was impressed with his genuineness of attempting to, interpret biblical scripture. Good luck with that one. And so, with that said, I began my own investigation and came across Hopi Indians. Now, the Hopi, the reason they are considered the first ring is that medicine, Indian medicine is the songs and dances, your history, and where you came from and what made you become what you are now. And the movie Enemy Mine depicted that concept where the alien would sing to his son their history. And it was a song, and that is called medicine. And when the Clovis crawled out of a cave some 5,000 years ago, 5,000 plus years ago, the Hopi have a continuity of memory from that moment to their present as their form of history, which is different than the way we do history. We have archaeology and anthropology, and we have other forms of historical reference that try to be hard sciences, but it's important to remember that medicine as such changes in metaphor with cultural variances. Obviously having a thumb and fire would be called cybernetic anthropology. There is a very interesting website called Lucifer.com that is a bunch of anthropologists that are talking about the church of the virus, the idea of a metaphor or a meme that pervades archetypally in a given culture and then manifests itself in terms of reality. It's important that we take this concept into full money, because I'm going to suggest, with all of my acumen and background, that imagination is reality. and I just completed a series of articles on the structure of water and how psyche is brought into matter. It has to do with resonant cavity oscillators and the idea of a holographic universe, which is to be distinguished differently from a quantum one. Now, Stanford and Caltech have just recently announced the fact that our sun has a binary out past the Oort cloud. It has been identified, there it is, and it has been in the public scrutiny, albeit the media hasn't put a big deal on that, and I will explain why shortly. Let me say this. Everything that I have discovered to date appears to be a metaphor to a cavitation ball. Now, that means the past and the future are somehow simply connected to the moment or the present. And that every black hole in the center of each galaxy has a white hole somewhere else. And that if you looked at your body physically, emotionally, and intellectually, if you looked at yourself as having an angel, a higher self, that accurately, it's usually an androgynous part. That means that if you're male, you have a female counterpart. And that higher self is your angel trying to talk to you by the way you find significance in one thing over five others vying for your attention. Now, the fact that it seems to have a hollow earth concept or double ganger would suggest in the cavitation process of structured water, and we can talk about that later if you'd like, the idea is that you are in a physical world right now, which is by most schools of religions, plural, considered a place where you go to be sick spiritually. And that the other side of the black hole is a white hole where your higher self, as a timeline, is trying to change the primary wave, which is your past. And so our sun, as most suns in our galaxy, are binaries. I would say that 97% of all star systems are binary systems. Isn't that an interesting coincidence?
Indeed.
And so, of course, we have a binary out past the Oort cloud that it appears to be a dead brown dwarf, possibly with an artifact around it, like a Dyson sphere. The infrared signature on it is different than it should be, and we have no physical explanation for why that is at this moment until we start to look at the fact that historically, every 50, 600 years or so, in fact, it's a series of different resonances. Things occur where a planet will come through and create our asteroid belt, or Mars. Mars, for example, is most likely where our historical concepts of a water planet and Atlantis were there. It actually has physically more water than Earth does. If you have the Earth and the Moon, and you bring a little volumetric circle out on the amount of water on the Earth, you brought a fourth ball in from the amount of water on Mars, which is a much smaller planet, you'll discover that there's more water on Mars. And that was something that I helped develop back in the very early 60s with my science fair projects as a high school student. They were used on the Mariner 4 in 1964 to actually measure the amount of water on Mars. My high school experiments were first to propose a tachyon and muon. Actually, it was a new meson field theory based off of Yukawa's work out of Japan. And what I'd done as a junior in high school is write the physics of how a tachyon would work, working with a meson at that time was called a muon, and now it's considered an elementary particle, but back when I did it, it was still a meson, an outsider, a conglomerate of electron, proton, and neutron. Today, we have a much different construct of how matter is formed, but we'll talk about that in another lecture at some point if you'd like.
Oh, I'd love to.
I'm ranging here, setting up a field about Nibiru. The reason I'm doing this is that if imagination is reality, and I can write mathematical equations to prove it. So that doesn't mean it's true. What it means is it's a way of looking at reality. There are options. When you have a theory or a theorem and a model of the universe, what that does is it sets up doors and it sets up locked doors. That means this is not possible in this concept of a universe. Whereas in a different concept of a universe, now you have possible doors that were no longer previously available to you. Working from a quantum information point of view, everything in quantum mechanics is done with space-time. Now, if you consider time and space are not the shortest distance between 2 points, then you have, it's curved space, time has duration, Robert Ornstein, that kind of thing. Then you can come to a holographic system where you say that it's about information. And what you do is you measure, instead of things in space and time, you measure things in terms of information and detail or resolution of that information. And there is, in information theory, a theorem that states if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. In other words, the structure of the question determines the information. It's a resolution of resonance, going from one subset to another. And so the physical plane is the first plane. The second plane above that, using Leary or others as neurologic circuits, it's arbitrary, is emotional. And why we stress such importance on EQ. The idea that how you feel about something. It's how your higher self talks to you in dreams and feelings. It isn't about seeing something. That's a type of hallucination. You're not actually feeling it either. That is a metaphor for the nervous system and its relationship to emotions. Then above emotions would be intellectual plane. The intellectual plane would be where Plato would make a distinction between a chair and a couch. They're both things that you can sit in, but one has a different kind of what John Bohm would have called different similarities and similar differences in the way we went from binary systems into object-oriented metaphors. Now, in the way we group pieces of information, that part turns out to also be arbitrary. That means that almost anything that you can conceive of is true, and even more since you're only in 4th grade. Now, using that metaphor, Graham Hancock, others have absolutely proven that there are cycles in the history of our various epochs, floods, and events that change one civilization to another. There is a cave in France that will depict star maps over 5,000 years ago that were accurate, that and concluded during Babylonian periods or whatever, that's the way the stars were constellated from viewing from Earth. And then in another cave, it will be in absolute reverse, which means that those star maps were witnessed from space. And one of those cultures, the Clovis, crawled out of a cave. That means there is going to be, you can count on it, a cataclysmic event that has had repeated cycles in history and talked about in the Colburn Bibles and now our current Bible. as, the end of days. It is not the end of man, because man did crawl out of a cave and start over again. And we have in previous epochs, if you go in technology, that's what I did a lot for the military, was look at what you would call alien technology that wasn't alien. It was from previous civilizations of man.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I got to I have to interrupt you on that, Dr. Miller. I love listening to you, but I wanted to get into that. This is a theory that I've been playing around with for a long time too. I've never been too keen on do I leave the opportunity or the possibility open that there extraterrestrial life that has visited us and interact with us? Absolutely. You could be a fool not to, right? But as it relates,
yes, I've actually had military experience with aliens. If imagination is reality, how could they not be? How did Allie put it in the movie Contact? It seems like it would be an awful waste of space.
That's right. And so, but let's set aside the alien theory for just a moment and then go back to this human epoch theory. I follow Graham Hancock. Who's the other guy? Gordon. I want to say Gordon. I can't remember his name. He's like a high level Mason who really talks about fractals and divine architecture and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, the point being is I was sitting listening to Graham one day, and it occurred to me that this was a couple of years ago, that it's very possible, very likely that human beings have reached technological pinnacles that are even beyond where we are today. For example, I believe that the structures on the moon are not of alien origin. I believe that previous epochs of humans built that.
Well, the moon's fairly new. Yes, that's probably correct. And pyramids and sphinxes and underground chambers and, there's pyramids everywhere. The one in Indonesia that just got discovered is very interesting and much older than Egypt. And so yes. And when you talk about the Greek culture and their concepts of philosophy, of course, certain elements or art forms were evolved way beyond where we are now. I'm watching how sound and movement, just dancing, changes space-time. Whirling dervish, ghost dance. I can draw up a lot of examples of paranormal abilities when going into certain altered states, working with sound and music. And the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, part of the Bible, is relating sound to words and how to evoke the name of God. And so, with that said, there are technologies where Gabriel probably moved a mountain with his sound. And I have actually witnessed whirling dervish in Turkey do paranormal phenomena where they will actually cut each other with swords. I saw one guy with the sword stuck through his stomach, out his back, whirling, and then he pulled it out with no blood. Now, I have studied that with Jack Schwartz at the Menninger Foundation. And so this is an individual that can do like whirling dervish or dead, where he could put needles through his arm and stop the bleeding. And if you don't think the military didn't want to know how that works, now, if man can do that with mind alone, well, then what would an alien constitute? Our future? There's all kinds of possibilities because it all comes back to imagination and the unlimitedness of our most basic natural resource, our children. See, there's a metaphor going on here across the board in a variety of areas that all have significance. And what we choose to focus on over other things that are possibly there is how your future is talking to you at this moment to create the cavitation ball called the past, what you did. It is about the moment. Now, there is, from a physical plane point of view, a binary out past the Earth cloud, and it has several already identified planet 10, planet 9, has been identified as a binary that has some kind of weird elliptical loop that comes through our galaxy or our solar system every 5,600 years. Nibiru. Now, the Hopi call it the blue kachina. And this is the songs that they sing to their children and ancestors of what was remembered from 5,600 years ago. And that's what makes the Hopi first preserve. Right now, the Hopi's primary source of income, by the way, is doing the ritual of the wobbled egg. And that is an interesting thing with Bert Bolin. He's a Nobel Prize winner in Stockholm in geoelectrodynamics by John Wheeler, one of my teachers. And I'm going to say here that we have pole shifts that are going to happen. They have historically happened. We have history, and we can see the mappings of it, and it has cycles. And right now, something has changed the cycles and behavior of our sun. And the sun affects everything on Earth. It is the volcanoes, it is the earthquakes. Right now, we are facing a serious problem with Fukushima and the recent earthquake that was there and how it is going to affect the rest of the contamination now going into the ocean. And there are life forms that survive in that soup. They're called the black slime mold. And there you are in Chernobyl and now Fukushima, and also 3 Mile Island. They're all present. And with what's going on up in New York City and Indian Point and down in Miami right now, every single nuclear power plant right now is leaking. Every single one. And there's at least 400 I can count on in some place in the world right now. I posted just this morning on Facebook some that are failing in the Netherlands. There's problems going on everywhere, and the media is not covering it. And now this is called plausible deniability. And that guy in the White House, after the president is dead in the movie Day After Tomorrow, and he says, oh no, in 2012, excuse me. In 2012, he says, it's for their own good. We'll let them go out enjoying life rather than making them interfere. Now, fear is a weapon, and who makes that decision for someone of my intellect?
Or mine.
That's where labor laws and my systems of magic draw in, where it's natural law over civil. And what we're looking at is your right to know. And the problem is you don't have rights. You have responsibilities. Rights would mean you have full disclosure. You don't. That means you do have choices. That's what made you God's favorite. And it's time to exercise that responsibility of controlling the thoughts you choose to entertain. If you do that, none shall say nay. That's a direct quote from Aleister Crowley. And none will say. That means the universe wants it to happen. And this is going to be the difference between intent and purpose and what makes you different than a machine.
Mm-hmm. So along that line, it seems like, and I'd like you to comment on this. This is just my experience, Doctor, right? So I find extremely smart people, very bright people, that just, it's almost a blindness. Like I'll say, well, take a look at this. This shows geoengineering, them trying to, let's say, for example, modify the weather for whatever reason, and I'll show them a chemtrail, or I'll show them a halo, that big red halo that shows up around the sun or something like that. And I've had some of the smartest people I know look up and say, I can't see it. And I'll be like, dude, it's right there. You can't see it?
Well, Okay, so then you go back to an old Selma cartel saying, I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, that's what we're talking about here. And the voice of reason and the voice of coyote, and how you step outside the box as opposed to remaining inside the box. It turns out it's the same voice and it's different for each of us. That's because each of us is a different solar system. We are unique in that sense of it as a soul. And with that said, there will probably be as many churches as there are human beings. The reason you join a specific church over another is for fellowship and reinforcement of moral codes of ethics and rules of conduct. And that now has been lost in America for 2 generations without a family. So that now we are left with 2 generations with no direction. And that's why I came back as the magus that came in from out of the cold. I'm bound to try to give you footprints so that you write and follow your own.
That's right.
Path working is a way of being. It is a way of living in its relationship to yourself. Yourself is your holy guardian angel, your guardian angel, your inner feminine part of self, the androgynous part of what you see. In the tree of life, as a metaphor, the male and female sides have 2 paths going to God, not one. The 2 paths are the hermit and the lovers. You do it androgynously, or you have an external reflected partner. Now, you have a choice in the way you choose to see things. And so it's arbitrary. And for those that are blind in certain areas, you might learn something from that. Because to realize, is the glass half empty or half full? Is faith real? No. What faith is it makes you feel better. It isn't that it's more real or not real. It makes you feel better. And what do you want to do? Do you want to feel better? Okay, then take the adage, things always work out in the end. And if it's not working out, it's not yet the end. And it's the way you encapsulate your metaphor and form a cavitation ball, which is known as your past. That's your primary wave and only exists in terms of a beginning, a middle part, and an end. And it has to do with sacred time over the profane. And what you're trying to do now is actualize these things in a physical plane metaphor. Okay, we have the blue Kachina that is affecting our sun, and you get what you get. Now, you asked the second question, how can we survive all of this? Well, the part I'm teaching with urban survival skills with Matt Stein is the fact that it isn't your knowledge base that's going to save you, it's your attitude. And you have the panache of knowing that no matter what, I'm going to get through this because I can if I want to. That's because you are literally creating your own reality at this very moment. I raised my daughter as if she were a younger, feminine projection of my consciousness into the physical world. She wasn't real. I raised her as a metaphor of my younger, feminine part of self. And boy, did I learn things about myself watching my daughter. And she did things I couldn't do. And I yet could not criticize her because how could I? She's me. What I had to do was accept and grow with what it all means and how to integrate it into my current moment. And that's what I'm trying to do at this general point. And that is called the evolution of consciousness.
So again, going back to it's an attitude, and again, I believe that
attitude is all there is.
That's all there is, right? And
If you think you can do it, you absolutely can. If you think you're sick, you absolutely are. Sickness, from a metaphor point of view in Jungian psychotherapy, is the way your higher self gets your attention, that things need to change.
that's what I've always believed too. Yeah.
Well, it's not, believe it or not believe it, it is a model for the way you approach illness. American Indian had only 400 sicknesses, and they had a cure for each one of them. How many illnesses do we have today?
I know, right?
100,000. And some of them have gotten so complex we have no cure. Whereas the American Indian always had a cure.
Yeah, well, I don't think that our medical culture necessarily is looking for a cure, Dr. Miller.
What's that?
I don't think that our medical establishment's looking for a cure. I think they're looking for a profit.
Well, same with Mopar and designing things to be obsolete, marketing and capitalism and the nature of barter.
I have to return to the Buddhist point of
Money
view.
is a theatrical prop. It's not real. What's real is labor. And so if you're going to achieve what the Greek, higher culture than ours, called autarch, supreme individual sovereignty, then it would appear that your first would be to teach a child how to determine whether water is safe to drink. That's a good place to start education. The sandbox is something all children get right out of the gate. They just know that if they do this now, does that mean we're not going to be able to teach our children farming and agriculture? No, it means this is how we get off the physical plane. You know, there's a movie called Astral City. It's in Portuguese. And it's about this doctor that watches himself die on the operating table. And then at the moment of death, what happens next? It's generic. You can get it on Hulu for free. It's called Astral City. Worth watching. It gives a metaphor of how we are all time travelers from the future, that we have forgotten our destiny and forgotten why we came to the physical plane in the first place. There's something that needed to be learned, and what we call the Stanford argument of out of Stanford University, having to do with what happens at the end of the day, intent, as opposed to Maxwell Smart's intentionality of missing it by that much. He didn't do it. That's because it was not meant to happen. That is the correct way, a metaphor, if you will, the way I train SEALs to be Supermen in terms of making their mission their purpose. That means they can't fail because they're here to do what they were supposed to do. That is attitude. That is where you start, is in your frame of reference to self. That's an internal thing. It is not something you read or discover outside yourself. It's something that can only be discovered by going internal. And that's why all your saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation, quieting the mind, taking control of Cal.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I am relatively new to meditation, only 2 years.
What form do you use, please?
I just use mindfulness. I use my own technique as I've derived from my readings of Buddha. And basically, there's no technique involved. For me, it's a relaxing.
Okay, question. Yeah. Where does your mind's eye go at the moment you begin your meditation? Where do you start your meditation? Where's your mind's eye?
My mind's eye is in trying to let my mind reach that other place, the altered consciousness.
Do you place it at the third eye, or do you place it between your? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the center, of my consciousness, which means I have to relax my body. I have to do the breathing. I have to disengage my physical, and then I reach a different state of consciousness where, gosh, how do I even say this? It's a place of absolute peace and resonance and harmony that I try to achieve. And then when I've quieted all that down, I can tell which voices are coming from outside and which ones are coming from inside.
Excellent. You say that takes 30 years to actually get to that place of true, absolute resonance. And there are toys, technology that will get you closer, faster, but have risks to them. You know, anytime you take a shortcut, grandma's house through the woods, there's big bad wolves.
Right.
And so being mindful of that part, like using drugs, ayahuasca, a flat iron skillet, like the Jesuits used to whip themselves into frenzy, using hypnosis and the tools. There are a thing called brain drivers. And I have a whole chapter of that in my Power Tools book that you might want to reference as a shortcut that will get you there in 5 years rather than 30. Now, with that said, it's also like biofeedback. Mm-hmm. You're listening to sounds in your body. You need to reinforce that periodically until you're as old as I am and can change my heart rate, pulse, and respiration just at a moment's notice. That saved my life once. I was in a lifeboat that had missed the pickup in the Bering Sea, and I was at sea for almost 2.5 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And no shelter. It's cold. No water. And drinking urine. I mean, I was very lucky, and biofeedback and my training of heart rate, pulse, and respiration, that saved my life. It was like Mandrake the magician. I was able to go down into stasis. When they found me, I was blue, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
Well, that's Ron Dotson's new book.
Yeah, less dramatic story. And I'll share more as a layman because I see you as more of a teacher sage, right? And I'm more of a student. But I actually did this as a recommendation from my doctor. He wanted me to get into mindfulness, right? And he already knew I was a Christian, so he said, "Look, you already pray, so really this is just taking your prayer to the next level." He explained it to me really in a way that I really accepted it, right?
Yes.
My blood pressure, no less than 25 points in 2 years, has gone down. Just as one physical.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that has to do with diet and attitude. Attitude is all.
It is attitude. Really is.
And that's what you call faith healing or placebo. It's your mental attitude. It will restructure water inside, setting up resonances with timelines. And I just wrote the physics of how that works. Now, with all of that said about writing the physics of it, I know of no law in our current systems that's lasted longer than 20 years. We constantly are revising our worldviews and the concept of the special and general theories of relativity. So
yeah, but that would imply then that
now we're talking about holographic.
Oh no, what you're saying is the human consciousness and the imagination of the human consciousness is what drives. It's like it's not linear, man. It's like okay, let me put it this way.
That's a good way. It's not linear, man. That's a good way to put it.
It's not. And so when you say something like my future self, and the way I would interpret it, right? I have a future self that wants me to come into a line with my destiny.
There's a bunch of data there, more than you comprehend, and that's called the journey.
Right. I would go with that.
The journey part of changing you, which is the rule from where you are, your current, gosh, I'm head of my universe. That part is discovery of the moment and the surprise of the difference of you can't know God, but you can experience him. That means you do it at levels of awareness. And that these levels of awareness are called higher states of consciousness. Oh gosh, there's 8 of them. There's 8 different kinds of cosmic consciousness levels, jhana states, what the Buddhists called mystical states of ecstasy. That part is like the metaphor of love. Now, love in our society has a lot of different meanings, and the Greek were even so far aware of that that they quantified different kinds of love with eros, philo, agape, and telema. And telema was the love of will, your purpose on earth. That's why Crowley called it, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. That means it was a way of being. It was that you would be loving and open to people and trying to help them, like brotherly, unless it deterred you from your true will, in which case that was the most important thing to do. And while we, all of us, might seemingly going in different directions, that's God's will and the discovery of the journey. The not making judgment any more than I could on my daughter, raising her as if she were a reflected part of self. That's a seen philosophy. That was the whole concept of Jesus' teachings. He went to India, he studied a seen philosophy for some 20 years, and came back and began to walk that talk. And that's what made him the Messiah over John the Baptist or whomever else was runner-up at that time. There were a lot of looking around, knowing it was going to happen. Like right now, we know the end of days is going to happen. It is a metaphor in the way we are relating to ourselves. And you chose to be here at this moment to witness the end and the beginning. There's both things, glass half full, glass half empty, and the opportunity of a possible seventh epoch for man. Now, as a scientist, I would be remiss if I did not say, if you do not turn that switch off now, there probably will not be a seventh epoch for human beings. Maybe black goo, sure, but certainly not human.
Boy, that's the common concern. If I go to my most fundamentalist, person, whatever religion.
That's the thing. Okay, well then that would be the first order of business.
Get the power plants turned down.
Before you even worry about GMOs and chemtrails and the end of days, you turn that switch off, because if you do that, there will be in your mindset the probability of a seventh epoch. There it is. That's how it works. And so it's as simple from a physicist that is also a psychologist and a medical doctor. I have, through my history, a sense of self and purpose. And while I might have been blessed, truthfully, an eidetic memory like I enjoy is a double-edged sword, and it cuts a lot of different ways. Trust me. I mean, I have, I had a little girl die in my arms, my stepdaughter, when I was 60 years old. I lost everything. This is me reinventing myself another time in this single lifetime.
I see that in you.
All going to do that in cycles like epochs. That's how it works.
So, in a sense, the human experience in this 80 years is a fractal for the whole epoch of man.
Exactly. That is one metaphor. So let's detail. Resolution.
Right, yes. Right.
And it's all there in the structure of water, and 70% of there's 70% water. And you're in 99%. That water is in 99% of your body. That means that you have all past, present, and future timelines and options with imagination, which is the spirit, or soul and spirit within matter. The stag and the unicorn in the forest go.
Right on.
Soul and spirit within matter, and that's a Christian alchemical concept that I wrote about in The Modern Alchemist, which is talking about the various stages in evolution that one has to go through, including, the puer wounding and Ulysses scarring. Where are you whining like a baby because you've lost something, and then you accept your humanness. That means you have limitations. And as you're not God, you are godlike in that from God's favored, God would be defined as that which cannot be known.
Second time in 2 days I heard that.
I'm sorry?
That's the second time in 2 days I heard that.
Okay, that is a definition, one definition in most philosophical discussions of what God is. I watched this wonderful movie the other day called God Is Not Dead 2. It was wonderful. It's worth watching. Actually, Pat Boone is wonderful in it, and he's right now out there championing its solidity. It was a wonderful movie, inspirational. The whole concept of faith is it real or not? And it is part of the imagination, and when you give it energy, it makes you feel better. So from a philosophy point of view, it's what makes you feel better. Is that important? Well, no, not for some people. Some people like to be, depressed and angry. I don't know anybody that has cancer right now that did not first start with anger. That's how it works.
Interesting.
Well, it's a metaphor in our relationship to self. So, of course, Nibiru is real. And yes, of course, it's all going to happen just like it did before. And when? I have no idea. However, there is a feeling. Do you know what a cavitation ball is? That's a good place to start. A cavitation ball is when a drop of water, solid drop of water, hits the surface of water and bounces back up. When it bounces back up as a and you have a second bubble that comes up. That bubble is not a solid bottle of water anymore. It's a cavitation of exclusion zone water, H3O2, that has surrounded the medium. And the medium air, if it's falling in air, that air is a topological surface where it's a torus going into the out of. And that's a cavitation ball. That's why you can surf. You can see it on the leading edge of a wave. Mm-hmm. It is exclusion zone. It's because whatever water touches, it has a unique relationship to every single one memory of knowing what it's touching. And in this case, in air, that leading edge forms exclusion zone water, and layers and layers of them. And water, the exclusion zone, to be likened to a forbidden zone in where you do your checksum error storage memory in chips, computer chips with gallium arsenide. That's called a forbidden zone. The actual storage capacity is in water is 1 million times more. That means 6 zeros of information in this, and it's way, way more efficient. And when you realize that when you're born, and we have in philosophy a priori and a posteriori knowledge of awareness of what to do from previous, like sucking, and what not to do, and you learn behavior. This is the construct, again, epigenetics and genetics and epigenetics outside the body. Now, there is a dialogue going on in this cavitation ball that is a topological surface. And if you want to read more about that, you start with Roger Penrose and his geometric universe. And it runs it down chapter and verse to be distinguished differently than Stephen Hawking and his black and white holes. However, the two of them ended up writing a book together, Point Counterpoint, and at the end of the book, they come to the same conclusion on the universe. So the models are arbitrary, and why you choose one model over another is for the doors that it allows as possibilities. And a holographic universe allows the construct of changing the movie.
And that's where attitude comes back into play, because if I don't release the doors of my imagination, that attitude, then those possibilities don't exist to me.
Well, you got the right keywords in there. That's a good start.
Yeah,
I'm going to go halfway to the door.
Hey,
now that's your starting site. You'll never get to the door because each time you only get to go halfway. So then, of course, it is the detail of the journey and the resolution of the information. Giving you some keywords for your mind's eye, because once you've got it in your mind's eye, the physics is irrelevant. It varies from one BPOC to another, sound and movement, changing space-time. These are other ideas of why we like music and why we like to dance. And when you watch a bunch of creepy people doing engineers doing ghost dance on the platform at CERN, what the, that is a bunch of fanatics trying to bring about biblical prophecy. I have something important to say here.
Sure.
The reason I am a scholar in the occult and a magus or master magician, sleight of mind, is because when I came out of graduate school, I got rushed, just like the high school kids do when they go to college. And every single bureaucracy, Republican Party, whatever, they all have secret society, a cult lodge. And the problem is, like their education, most of them don't know goat turds from pork and beans. And that's where I had to armor up to protect myself from this element, just like you all should at some point. Now, your religion is an internal resonance with you that you just find useful. If that's the truth, follow that star. You won't ever get there, but the journey of discovery of the moment will be so, that's where it all lies, in that moment of doing it. Right. And I'm now to a place where I've got shortcuts. That's what I did with power tools. This is the way I took, exceptional human beings and made them paranormal. And there are shortcuts like meditation. You've been 2 years into it. I think you're ready to start playing with some brain drivers, frequency following function, and brain entrainment techniques. And with that said, like neuro-linguistic programming, you can evolve more in dialogue than just the spoken word.
Interesting. Let's take a moment, though, while we're here, just got a minute. I would like to shift gears a little bit. Before we do, Dr. Miller, I think you are a prolific writer, you're a publisher. Could you tell us a little bit about how people can get a hold of your stuff?
Yes, starving artist comes to mind. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
No, okay. I have a bookstore at oak-publishing.com. Now, that has 14 books or so on it, and that's just a taste. Mm-hmm. I have other websites. If you go to my primary website, richardallenmiller.com, and that's A-L-A-N, Miller, richardallenmiller.com. That's my primary website, and I have a blog, a daily blog, that you can follow going back years into discovery of what's going on out there. It was in the year 2001 that I came back out of agriculture and wrote my first technical scientific paper again for a rave that was being offered in Sisters, Oregon, with the Crystal Method and Heinrich Clark and others there. You know, Heinrich Clark was boiling down Amanita muscaria, shaving heads, and smearing it on the top of your head. It's called a Pope's Cradle. And let me tell you, those guys were having, you know, relationship with God. Well, I wrote a paper called Synthetic Telepathy and the Early Mind Wars. And that I send you a copy of that. You can give that. All those papers, the holographic concept of reality, that paper I wrote in 1972. And so I can tell you how it all discovered in Structure of Water. The new book I'm writing is called The Non-Local Mind in a Holographic Universe, or How to Change the Movie. And Power Tools for the 21st Century, which is, it's a 3-book series starting with ESP and How to Think with the Gut. That's where you start, is with attitude. Once you have your attitude correct for metaphor, everything happens for a reason, everything leads to something better. And then the second metaphor would be things always work out in the end. And if things are not working out, it's not yet the end. That's how you look at Nibiru.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It is an opportunity for evolving to the next level that man deserves. And I am leaving some footprints on how to do that. 45 years ago, I did it by listening to the sounds in my body with heart rate, pulse, respiration, and brainwaves. Now, 45 years later, I'm doing that with specific neurotransmitters. The chill up your spine. That is the release of N, and hyphen dimethyltryptamine. And it's a light beam. It's actually in the visible light region, and that's why they talk about the light. And it will hit, if you straighten your spine approximately correctly, you can stimulate the neural cavity by activating the pineal gland, which is at the ass end of it. And what that is a resonant cavity oscillator that now can be changed to make true nerve tissue rather than just glial cell. And once you learn how to do that, that means that regenerating nerve tissue is now possible. And Robert O. Becker and I did that experiment in the early 70s at the School of Medicine, the Department of Anesthesiology, where I regenerated a nerve tissue in my down by at my knee, which was severed. I had drop foot, and I now have complete recovery of that doing meditational exercises 45 years ago. And what I'm doing now with neurotransmitters is beyond imagination, and I am literally now understanding how to change the movie.
That's crazy. Sorry, not crazy in the sense of insane, but just it's mind-blowing what you're saying.
And you have another website if you'd like to see my Facebook. You can get there easily at docram.com. And that's where I'll post the Netherlands nuclear power plant that's now just going in meltdown today. They just closed it, yes. And there's other things going on that our media is not because of agendas. And some of them are nefarious.
Oh, yeah.
Well, your imagination. If you can imagine it, it's real. That's where the responsibility part comes in. And that you don't have rights. You have responsibilities. And that's what made you God's favorite, is that you have that choice right this moment. And that's how it all works.
Yeah, going back to the fundamental idea of that you choose what you allow your mind to entertain.
That's right. It doesn't matter whether it came from your neurotic father and it's part of your inner dialogue, or it came from outside synthetic telepathy and or targeted individuals. Who cares?
Who cares?
Alien.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. What you do is be mindful. That was the word you used also. Mindful. And that's where it starts, on the inside and projected outward, not from the outside being projected inward. You have control.
Got it. Hey,
And when you can't do it, you go back and do it again. When you can't do it, you go back and do it again. And the attitude is, I'm going to get it until it's done. Period. End of story. That's the way I am.
interesting. Hey, not to get too I love this spiritual stuff is just meaty to me, and I love it.
Yeah, we can get more practical. Yes.
Oh no, what I wanted to do is I want to go to your history a little bit, because you were on an interview recently, and I heard you, and this is just me satisfying intellectual curiosity, so nothing else, right?
Sure.
So I am interested in what the Nazis and the Krill Society did in 1945. I'll say what I have to say, and then I want to hear, because you actually have seen some of this stuff. What happened there? What happened with the Nazis in 45? Did they run to Antarctica? Did they start another gig down there and continue the research with anti-gravity?
Probably went to Mars, probably went to the moon. I've seen all those science fiction classics.
But I think you actually went to Antarctica in the 60s, didn't you?
Not in the 50s, in the 70s, early 70s.
70s, okay.
Yeah, and in the 60s, it was nuked. There's actual pictures after Byrd was there in the 40s, 49 I think it was, and they lost 3 ships and encountered jets and Foo Fighters, neither of which technologies existed. Of course, the 2,000-year war, the Nazi war, the 1,000-year war, the da-da-da-da. I don't know anything about that part of it. What I know is that when I went to Antarctica as a physicist to study bioluminescence and how the light in this huge cavern worked, I saw a Nazi base that was from the 60s. It was in the 60s is when it got nuked. There was a room for 19 subs. There was, I saw a few miles away a Viking base from the 14th century that was in ruins and disarray. I saw, that means Antarctica has been there a long time and been used by many societies. Mm-hmm. I saw that part. Imagine a cavern that is more than a mile high, with clouds, weather, rain, snow, wind, and light. And they brought me in to figure out how the light worked. That's what I did there. That was bioluminescence. I have that paper. Would you like me to upload that paper? That will be in a new book I'm writing called Spooks Central.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
I did with MRU. Yeah. Antarctica existed. I have a friend that's in Brazil. For 42 years, he was head of the Brazilian Secret Service. Mad Abe Averala. He wrote Bloody Brazilian Knife Fighting Techniques. Check it out. He's out of Brazil, my friend, and Sao Paulo. And they used to stage on that island in front of Brazil before they would go into Antarctica. And it was extremely well known down there. Why the U.S. public never talked about it, I don't know. Kennedy was the one that went in and nuked them and drove them out. I was on red ice and talking about it a number of years back, and a man from the Royal Air Force called me. He's 10 years older than me. He's in his 80s. And told me that he was part of that mop-up crew that went in and nuked out and then mopped up the remaining Germans that were there. And a few of them escaped into lower caverns. That means below the mantle, 100 miles. And there is a middle.
There you go. Now you're on to what I want to talk about, man. Yes, please. Yes, that's it.
Well, here's the deal. If these Nazis escaped, and it talks about that place in the Bible, besides Noah, there were others that escaped the flood by going into deeper caverns.
Yeah.
And that's what they meant by deeper caverns. That's where the Yazidi up in the northern part of Iraq, and those catacombs is where the Stargate was identified and located. It was the second Bush with his tomography. They didn't do it. The first Bush couldn't find it, and that was what the war was all about. Back in the 70s, we knew about the Stargate from the sacred tradition of the Yazidis or devil worship, by Joseph out of the Vatican. It was a 1919 book on a pre-Christian devil worshiping cult. Now, pre-Christian devil worship is impossible. That meant something else is going on. That's what the first flag was up and led to the fact that there was probably an artifact. It talked about a door where these little tiny demons would go back and forth. And that was Yazidi up in the northern part of Iraq. You can check it out. It was discovered in the 80s. That's a decade after I was in the military doing it. And I was the early part. We knew about it. There's another interesting part. I have a copy of the Yazidis here in my library. There's a second part on that. It mentions in the book, a second artifact, just like in the movies.
Yeah.
I can't believe it, man. And Aleister Crowley was talking about it in 1902 with Aiwash and the channeling in Cairo. And Golden Dawn, like you, were 20 years ahead of the official Church of Rome coming out with disclosures on it. And Joseph Isaiah. Now, our level of selective disclosure is called counterintelligence. And that's lying by omission. And that is a technique of where you give the truth, but not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. What you do is mislead by giving out some information, but not another. Of course, the Vatican is interested in Nibiru. So, of course, they would set up in Tucson and other places those giant telescopes to take a look-see. Of course, that's what SETI is about. And, of course, it's not that easy. With our current levels of technology, you'd think we would be able to really do something. It's not that easy. Space is a big universe, and there is a lot of stuff out there and millions of light years away. In fact, there is new evidence to indicate that something quite different is going on. And so, the Earth being flat, good luck with all of that. And the world and the universe revolves around man.
Yeah, that's pretty egotistical. Yeah. I always thought that flat Earth thing was just a way to make average, intelligent, spiritual people look stupid.
Well, you can prove the Earth's flat.
Oh, really?
It's just curved, and you can do a curvature of space that would absolutely then require the topological mathematics to show Earth as being flat. But it's the way you choose to look at it that opens and closes specific doors.
There you go. We're back to the original theme again, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it's important that you understand that a physicist's approach is to start with definitions and assume truths, and then lead to theorems, corollaries, and postulates. Postulates, theorems, corollaries, and then laws. And the laws change every 20 years, except maybe Maxwell. The right-hand rule of thumb. So you see, the right-hand rule of thumb is close to cavitation. I think this next century, we are going to find that everything has a second part to it. Every single thing. That's where duality comes in, and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes. Speaking of that, like, for example, the way that we're looking at the universe right now, would that be this discovery of dark matter?
Dark matter may or not. I don't know how that's going to play. Yes, I would. My intuitions say yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I don't either. I'm also just guessing right now.
But I'm going to guess that I could probably figure it out, and that's the part that military liked about me. I can't be snowed technically. Can't snow me technically. I can get it. I can tell you how cold fusion works. I got a whole chapter in my new book on that called Rock the Casimir, or Adventures in Time Travel.
That would be a good place for us to start the next interview that we have, Dr. Miller.
Okay? You bet. No problem.
And I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to let you know that I appreciate you very much and the work you've done over your life. So just thank you for that.
Well, stay tuned. Same bat channel, same bat time.
Oh no, I think there's a lot more coming out of you, and I'll put all the links here in the description for everybody, so you can go check out.
Sure, give them as free downloads so that people can begin to read some of my other stuff that has never been seen in print that might be useful, and to realize I have right now 42 different manuscripts. I've written one for every year out of graduate school, and now I'm writing new stuff too.
Unbelievable.
It's really amazing. And just in agriculture, if you go to herbfarminfo.com, that's a bunch of PDFs. I have 360 PDFs. I'll send you a few of those uplinked so that people get an idea, like comfrey to make solar alcohol for running your fuel and vehicles.
In fact, that's super helpful because, and I'll kind of close with this idea, but one of the things that we've decided to do with, I call it a ministry, okay? That's what I think I'm doing right now. I'm helping people understand stuff, and I'm not so smart, right? But I just happen to...
You're actually on the path, and like I am, and at some point, hopefully, we'll go like Christ said, what I have done, you will do even more. That's one of Christ's predictions for men. And so with that said, we all of us have that kind of inner union, and that is halfway to God.
Oh, I believe that. That's a good place to actually to close. Dr. Miller, thank you for your time. We are definitely going to have you back on. I think, and what I was going to get into is that we are starting informal groups. This is not like some kind of cult or something like that. But what I did,
questions arise. That's where I actually, rather than me being circulars and giving my worldview, what would be nice is when I get to specific questions like in physics. My actual academic acumen is actually quite extensive, and especially in the occult, magic. Magic is an advanced form of physics with a mystery school. And anthropology, you'd see it with the Aborigines and the Hopi Indian. And the Hopi have a medicine that cures everything.
Wow. We've got so many things to track down with you, Dr. Miller. But again, I think people in my community, in this community, are going to be interested in your agriculture background. You guys.
Okay. Yeah. I was, by the way, I was a pallbearer, one of the pallbearers for Chuck Walters.
Oh my God.
Chuck Walters was my friend. We did The Potential of Herbs as a Cash Crop. I have another unpublished manuscript I did with him on hemp as a virgin white paper.
Interesting. Yeah, all of these things, right? So with that said, Dr. Miller, I appreciate you. Our audience appreciates you. There's so many. I could stay here and talk to you for 6 hours. I know that, but we got to limit it. So
I got you. Enjoy your edit.
Take care, my friend.
And when you got one, I'll post it on my Facebook. Like today, I had 36,000 views.
That's kind of where I'm getting to nowadays, and I guess.
Good. Let's go together. Maybe we can do another footprint for the rest of us.
That's what I want to do. I'm with you. God bless you, man.